Well, so this is my first encounter with students from Malaysia, although I have met some of you at different events in Pune. Well, first and foremost, Yoon showed you the cover of the book, Imagine If. And if you find the cover very interesting, I would like to say that there is, so I would just like to show you because it was not visible. So this is the cover of the book. And I just want to draw your attention specially, not because to the author of the book, but the design of the cover, because this design has been done by none other than a Malaysian who is in front of your screen, Yoon, who has designed this wonderful cover, which has attracted so many people, which convince people to read the book. So thank you, Vyun, for that. I would like to put it there. So, well, she asked me whether I would like to interact with the Malaysian students on the International Day of Yoga, and I'm really happy to do so. Well, the floor is totally in your hands. I am in your hands. Whatever you ask, I will make an attempt to answer to whatever capable and if my capability and ability. So floor is yours, Vyun. Whatever you representing the chairperson of the Malaysian Iyengar Yoga Association, you can talk on their behalf and you can go ahead. So let it be a quite an informal event. It's the International Day of Yoga is a celebration, and celebrations can be informal, free. We are all students of Iyengar Yoga, except that some of us may have been fortunate to spend more time with Guruji and Geetaji. So please go ahead.
Okay, maybe we can start with the book. How did the title Imagine If came about?
Okay, I'll just give you a little background of the book. Now, it so happened that as Vyun mentioned, I have been editing Yoga Rahasya for the past 26 years. It's last 1 year. It's the first time that we haven't had an issue published in 26 years on time. So the magazine was planned in such a manner that it would be on the annual day of the Institute, Hanuman Jayanti, Guru Purnima, and Patanjali Jayanti. So it was absolutely, because otherwise we could have dates. But now what happened is that we always used to have events in Pune on these 4 occasions. And that's the time the magazine was released for at least to nearly 20 years by Guruji and then by Geetaji. And then we just had a few issues by Prashantji. And during the course of editing the magazine, I was always on the lookout. I would meet students who had some extraordinary life, who were something apart from what normal yoga students were. And then I would write about their stories in Yoga Rahasya. So that time it was just a story informing people about, say somebody who had had an accident and how they coped with it, etc., etc., which would give a lot of inspiration to the others. So whilst talking, so it was primarily meant for the yoga fraternity. And it just happened that when I met one of the publishers for some other work, and we started discussing, and then she suggested that why don't we come up with a book on this? So that's how the book came about. It was a compilation of 6 to 7 stories of people who had extreme adversities. Today in the pandemic, a lot of us feel that we are living in adverse conditions, but these were the people who had something which, according to me, is unimaginable. Imagine, having in 25 years, cancers 5 times and going through the entire chemotherapy and, living with cancer and its therapy. Imagine somebody in their 20s walking onto a landmine and losing both their legs and then going on to climb Mount Kilimanjaro. Imagine somebody who has lost their eyes, their vision, their speech and hearing gradually in the same person, somebody who has lost their vision after the age of 18. So, or somebody who is, spending their life in prison. Now, these are things for me, it's very difficult to imagine being in such a situation. And I dread that, anybody whom I know should not be in such situations. So, but when I met those persons, incidentally, the way they perceived life was so different. And obviously, the common thread was they were all practitioners of Iyengar Yoga. Even then, the story of children with or adults with Down syndrome. So how the teacher teaches this, because you need a totally different sense of perception. These earlier stories is that how people led their life with, perceiving things which we don't commonly perceive. And other hand, when you have somebody with Down syndrome and not 1, 20, 25 of them, and how the teacher taught them, because their sense of perception is very different from what we commonly do. So, and once about 20, exactly 20 years ago, we had a massive earthquake in one of the states of India, and we were sent there. And how do we teach in such adverse circumstances? So, although we felt we were going to do something, we came back learning a lot, and that had changed my perception of how to view things. We generally tend to think in a particular tunnel vision, and gradually it maybe broadens out, but this gave me a totally different perception on life and on practice. And that's what, and then understanding Guruji's teachings. So something which Guruji said 30 years ago suddenly struck you, you could understand, and that's what I penned down in the book. When I wrote it, honestly speaking, I didn't know what the response would be, but well, I had been asked to write, and well, I was doing what I was expected to do and did my duty and wrote the book. But of course, at the back of my mind, there was some apprehension. How would general public take it? Because a yoga fraternity is always biased. We are all family. But the response has been very inspiring. People have been inspired, and incidentally, it is in the time of the pandemic. So I guess it helps people look at life differently in this time. So that's in brief about the book and how it came about. And I am a great admirer of Yoon's artistic and visual ability. So she's designed a couple of covers for Yoga Rahasya. So I requested her, and it's turned out to be wonderful book. So, and I know that there are many talented people in Malaysia. So, well, welcome you all to our fraternity.
Although
Thank you.
most of us have not read the book because it's not being published here. So maybe out of all these extraordinary experiences that you have gone through, which of the one that is most memorable and affected you most?
Actually, all were very different. But one, I mean, each one sort of touched me or affected me. But one that I can still visualize very strongly is that we were in Israel, and our hosts, I mean, we were there to teach. And then the host said, we're going to a special restaurant, and we went there. Well, you're going to a restaurant for dinner, so you try to decently dress up, not in our usual t-shirt and, just jeans over your shorts and go for dinner and after the class. And then they said, okay, if you have watches, so remove all that. So I was wondering what kind of a restaurant is this where you remove your watches and put them in the locker? I mean, we did that when we went to our lab, but all this. So I was, maybe it's something. And then suddenly they said, okay, don't make any noise and walk. And fine. And then they take us into a pitch dark room, and then this man puts my hands over his shoulders and say, follow. And then, when there is darkness and there's quietness, it's easy. But when there is darkness and there's a lot of noise, it became very, not scary, but it's a very eerie feeling. So you could hear metal, you could hear plate, noise of cutlery, and you could hear, crockery, people talking, laughing, and pitch dark. And that boy went far a little bit, and my hand came out, and I nearly froze. So I was like, where am I? It's a restaurant. I can sort of hear people talking and cutlery and crockery, but I couldn't see a thing. And because they'd made us remove all the jewelry, there was not even an iota of light. Otherwise, after some time, we get accustomed to darkness. When we come from light to darkness, after some time, our eyes get tuned in. It was pitch dark. And even the material they must have used for the plates was such that there was no shine or. And then this man says, oh, don't worry. Most of us here lead our entire life like this. And then it hits you that, these were all visually impaired people, and you sort of realize what it is. When you see somebody on the road, you feel pitiable, you feel, oh, sorry, or whatever it is. But this hits you quite a lot. So I think that was that split second. And of course, when we came out and you sort of appreciated that how so well they could negotiate in that darkness. So again, another sense of perception possibly evolved. So it was quite a thing. So although I didn't eat there, but just walking through was enough to leave behind an impact.
So you have been sharing like many articles in Yoga Rahasya for over 25 years. Like how different is it from writing those compared to this book?
Yoga Rahasya, I would say it's not really I'm editing it. So Yoga Rahasya for me was a means, again, Yoga Rahasya, the way it started was very, very casual. I was very, very young, if you can imagine, 26 years ago. I just finished college. And I was sitting in the library, going through books. And Guruji always used to be at the library at 2 to 2:30 in the afternoon. And I don't know, possibly I was very arrogant, the arrogance of youth, as I call it, or arrogance of ignorance. When you don't know anything, you think you know everything. So with that arrogance, I don't know why. I just went up to Guruji and I said, Guruji, there are magazines coming from different countries. They had, the UK had a magazine and Americans had the magazine. So I said, Guruji, India also should have a magazine. So Guruji just looked up at me. And now when I think back, I can imagine how foolish or stupid, I don't know, I don't have a word. He just looked at and said, yes, there are a lot of things that should be done. What is important is what is done. And I, again, it was, it hit me that what am I doing? So quite quietly, I came back. And as I'd just written my thesis, I was familiar. So it was an intermediary period in my so-called formal education. And Geetaji had once mentioned, during classes, because they used to come to Mumbai every weekend. So she mentioned there are some talks of Guruji and if somebody would like to transcribe. So I offered. So that transcribed talk, I formatted it and made it into a little booklet and then called up Guruji's house and said, Geetaji picked up the phone. They never had any kind of intermediaries. She directly picked the phone. Yes, what do you want? So I said, Geetaji, I have made a magazine and I want to come and meet Guruji and show it to him. She said, what? I said, yes, I have started this magazine. I want to start. Nothing was started. Okay, patiently she heard me. Then she asked me, so how frequently would it be? 4 times a year. So she says, okay, when? And I don't know, spur of the moment. This was also not even at home. I didn't even have a PC at home. I'm talking of 1992, 93. So then I said, oh, we have events. So Hanuman Jayanti, Guru Purnima, Patanjali Jayanti, which is normally October. And says, okay, you can come tomorrow. So I go there, give it. And Guruji actually read through it. So I had called it Yoga Darshanam. And, I just formatted it, put Patanjali's picture, made a booklet, 4 pages, turned it over, 16 pages or 30 pages or something, and went there. Then Guruji read through it and then he said, okay, get the Kannada dictionary. Then he wrote down 10, 15 names. And then finally he ticked and said, you can call it Yoga Rahasya. Darshanam is already somebody else's magazine. So that's how Rahasya started. So the idea was, and I mean, like I said, it was done out of bout of madness or whatever you call it. But it went on for 2, 3 issues. And of course, that time there was barely, I don't think there was any internet, barely internet had come in. So there was no way to reach out to people. And what I did initially was just transcribe talks or excerpts from talks and put it up for first 2, 3 issues. And then Guruji gave a wonderful article on pranayam for the second issue. But obviously, I had no knowledge on the philosophy of yoga. Practice had been there for 10, 15 years, but not a writer or not a philosopher. So then actually after 3 issues, somebody actually went and commented and, there were people who were helping, but they all walked out looking at the quality. But nobody could say it because it came from the institute. Then somebody happened to mention, that the way it is done. So I went down to Guruji again and I said, Guruji, I have done this, but it's, I don't know what it is. And I now realize I'm not qualified for this in any way. So then he said, yes, there are a lot of people who are definitely better than you, but has anybody done it? So then I said, yes, and we are not forcing anybody to buy it. It's there. So if people want to pick it up, they'll pick it up. So that's how it started. And I remember in the first time, we obviously gave it free because it was Hanuman Jayanti and whoever attended the programs at the institute. And then what Guruji did is he put some money in the thali as a contribution so that the magazine never runs out of money. And, it was a start. So then people put in, and that became our source money in 1994, Hanuman Jayanti. And then, of course, I realized, so naturally, then I started having more confidence. So it was primarily not much of writing, but planning out in such a manner that we communicated Guruji's messages to the community. So the whole idea was that, it was difficult when I'm talking 25 years ago. The fraternity was widespread, but it was difficult to get the messages from the source to listen to Guruji during different events, to because not everybody could come to India. So then this became a very strong means of communication. And then, of course, over the years, you evolved, you made it thematic. Then I started writing articles on therapy and the techniques Aarti started writing, combining from all the classes that Guruji took. So then it gradually made its own form. And I'm sure Guruji was quite happy with it. But he never ever, after that, actually ever said anything about the magazine in that manner. Only once I remember sometime in 2002 or 3, he just mentioned that it should not become monotonous. It should not become, so give something new. That's once. And once he said, when I had come out with a children's issue, all the articles pertaining to children, it was very embarrassing when he went onto the platform and, when he released it. And then he said, I request the editor to, have the next issue on adolescence. And I was so embarrassed. I mean, request kind of term coming from Guruji. But that was it. So it was, I now when I sit back and I wonder that Guruji's name, he was 1993. He had come back from this trip from UK, teaching a class of 1,200 people at Crystal Palace. I mean, he was even for those who did not know him, knew that he was at a very high level, even in the external world, to give his name to the magazine and, to be leaving it to a novice. So that shows, his compassion and the freedom. So I think so for me, it was a big responsibility in that sense to communicate, but at the same time, always felt they knew what it was. So that's how I always try to see that the messages from the three of them in terms of different articles or edited transcript of talks or their teachings went in. And then I started adding a few articles because some new novices found it very difficult to understand Guruji, because if somebody's just started Iyengar Yoga, for them, what is more understandable would be, what another fellow practitioner says, somebody's experiences. So then those articles came in. So that's where all these stories started coming in because they would be very inspirational. And I think it just evolved over time. And so that was very different because we're addressing a fraternity. And I think 99% of our subscribers to Yoga Rahasya are students of Iyengar Yoga. So basically, we speak the same language, So it was mainly addressing the community. Whilst book is for outsiders. Of course, the community is big, which would definitely appreciate it because, there are these. Because for me, anything I wrote was related to Guruji, what he had said, or something. So that comes in. But for the outside fraternity, we don't know. So that way, I think I've introduced some of the other aspects. But the core remains, of course, Guruji's teachings and how one's understanding evolves over time or has evolved over time.
So I've managed to read the first draft until the final published book. The sequence are a bit changed and different. How do you feel about these kind of changes into the flow of the stories?
I actually, after I sent you the first draft, I also sent it to a couple of very close family members who are practitioners of yoga, my sister, my nephews. And then I realized that what should be the first, because the stories are not directly connected. It's not like a sequence. So these are independent short stories. So that's how I changed the sequence to something which was more common in the sense, if you're talking of somebody suffering from an ailment like cancer, it's more common. Somebody impacted by an earthquake or such a massive natural disaster is relatively less common. And I think somewhere I just felt that this kind of connections would be better. So it was modified by myself. The publisher didn't really play, they were okay with whatever. In fact, this change was made after the editing was done. So when the final edits came to me, suddenly I read it and I said, no, I want to change it into this sequence and wrote a little introduction that they edited it that way. So they agreed to the change very easily. So I've been fortunate. I mean, the first publisher, Amazon, has been quite nice and very easy to work with because that's important. When you work with somebody, you need that you should feel at home. So it was like that with them.
Yes. So because we are all going through this very tough time, so from your experience with so many different extraordinary situations, how would you advise practitioner to cope with this kind of trauma?
See, I mean, in this current situation, people have various levels of trauma.
Yes.
The worst hit is obviously somebody who has had a severe bout of COVID.
Mhm.
There is somebody who has had very severe bout, or somebody who has lost a family member to a bout of COVID. So that is the very, very severe ones. There are, which is a small proportion, I would say. Then, of course, there are those who have been affected, but not so severely, but the impact of that, so there may not be much of a physical, physiological impact, but a mental impact, because you are at a, you don't know how the disease would have gone. You've heard of people who have gone so bad, worse, so it has created a big mental hit, I would say. And then there are others who have the fear of contracting, especially in the early days. Now, of course, with the scientific community's improved understanding of the disease, things are a little more, much more clearer. You know how to act, when to act. But in the early days, I think the first few months were, there was so much of anxiety amongst everybody. And then, of course, people losing jobs or finances. So that's another kind. So these are different levels. However, after seeing this kind of thing, and here I'll give you an example that, when, like I said, when we went to teach to people who were affected by an earthquake, and it was just a month later. And this was one of the areas where there was total destruction. So we went to a so-called village. Why I say so-called, there was nothing of anybody, any houses or anything. Everything was like heaps of rubble, as if there were mountains or hills made of rubble. And it sort of, you just freeze seeing such kind of thing. And then you had this little girl, we were teaching there for a week. They became very friendly with us, and then this girl told me, come, I'll show you my house. So okay, you've gone there, you joined them. She was about 12, 13, and then she shows me, all I could see was a little parapet, blue color, and everything had fallen. So you could sort of see outlines of what existed as a room. And she says, this is my drawing room, this was my kitchen, this is my kitchen. And then you realize, like, what is it? And what is loss? That's when you realize, like, everything has gone. I don't know how much of they would have collected in terms of physical material, their books, their money, cash, or documents, everything, and family members lost. And we were teaching there. Of course, it was a little tricky initially. And then there was this old lady who came up to me, and she says, thank you for whatever you have done. So I just sort of smiled, and I said, yes, we have the grace of Guruji and, the subject. And she told me, you know what? We, in this last 1 month, so it was 5 weeks. This has happened on our Republic Day, 26 Jan. We had gone there in the last week of Feb. And then she said, we have had a lot of people come and meet us, counselors, psychologists, religious preachers. So many people have come to us. And we all know that whatever has happened to us, we only have to endure it. Nobody can take away our pain. What has happened, we have to bear it. You all can help. But you are the first people who have shown us how. Because what we were showing them were asana practices as guided by Guruji. And then when she said, you have shown us how, you realize the impact of actual practice does even in such extreme situations. So it is then you realize how it impacts you, your emotions, your mind, and then gives you that strength to cope up. Because the situation is there. All we can do is see how best we can handle it. So I think that this is something. So for and I'm currently talking to all practitioners. I think that is something which we have very strongly with us. Being practitioners, we have studied it maybe for a few months, few years, many years. And what we don't need anything special for a practice. I mean, whatever we are in our houses, we can do it. If things have opened out, yes, studios, but in your own home, we can do something. So I think if we continue with practice, that gives us that inner strength to get certain resilience to withstand what is happening. I mean, so I think the greatest strength we have is in our practice, whatever we can do, whatever time we can give. But I think that is something which is helping us to, or rather even, helping us see things differently. Because to me, I feel that this has been a good time in that sense, because fortunately neither me or somebody close to me has been affected, that you have time for yourself in that sense. But of course, even apart from that, it sort of gives you that strength to withstand whatever is happening.
Yes, we are
You
quite
know?
lucky to be practicing. So just wondering, if you go like appearing in this kind of situation where everything is destroyed and you're in the rubble, how do you begin to teach the people? Like they are
I'll tell
already
you,
such trauma and they can't probably stand still because they're probably still shaking. How do you begin to guide these people?
I'll tell you it. What you're saying is absolutely right. It is, it's totally different from teaching a group of people who come to us to a yoga class. Okay, because they are coming out of will. In our case, I mean, I'm giving you from the real example. We were going, the organizers wanted us to go and teach, but the people there were not ready to receive, because they felt they had enough to do. They had to go, I mean, just live in those camps. So we also, when we decided to go, I actually went and met some psychologists to understand what is this massive trauma like. And we realized that it's a situation where it's very different. And because you have to be very careful of what you speak, because people are extremely sensitive. So any word, they will catch on to it. So where then we all went. So we were about, for 5 weeks, we were about a batches of 4 who went. So when we went to meet Guruji, the first thing he said, be like them. Don't, like, simplest thing is, don't go in your t-shirt and shorts. You're going to a camp in a village, be one of them. That's the first thing, so that people accept you. So if you're going to a traumatic condition, we have to go to that level to understand. Even if we will never feel it because we haven't experienced it, but at least on the outward, move along with them, talk to them, don't sermon or advise them, just be there. And in our case, then what are they looking for? So first, I'll just give you the example of how we ran through it and then what I have learned from it. So we went there and we went and met them. We had asked for some blankets to be transported, but they had not reached. So we met the head of the camp. And this, incidentally, was organized by the Aga Khan Foundation, which is, so more, they are Muslims, but some slight deviation or another sect or something, are not very conservative. But in times like this, religion plays a big role. And possibly the camps were already segregated on basis of religion, which would be more so, I feel, because they're having a common faith, they would be easier for them to handle it, because you sort of have similar rituals and habits and eating habits, etc. And so when we went there, we said, can we teach here? This was a nice, huge tent, quite leveled floor. So they said, no, you can't teach here. This is the Jamaat Khana, which is the place of worship. Or so I said, okay, where do we teach? In outside. And outside it was hot sun. It is a desert area. Of course, February was not that hot, but there was rubble and stones. So afterwards, some convincing, they said, you can do it. Whoever comes, first night, one person turned up. There were 400 to 500 inmates in the camp. Nobody turned up. Next morning, nobody turned up. And I remember when we were leaving and we sought Guruji's blessings, he said, so I said, Guruji, we've all planned up. This person will go, this group will go, and till May, from February to May. So he laughed and he said, it all depends on how you go about, madam, because if they don't want to do it, nothing is going to happen in May. So it was like, okay. And then, of course, we started getting a little jittery because nobody is coming. So the organizers then arranged for kind of an interaction, and the camp people, they sort of possibly forced them to come in. They came and we started talking about yoga and all. And somewhere during the talk, I must have mentioned that it gives you good sleep. And amongst many things must have spoken, I'm sure I spoke a lot of things trying to see something which would. And then after the end of that talk, one lady walked forward and said, my father-in-law has not slept for the whole month. He is very restless. He sits up in the bed in the camp. We are 7 families staying together in that one tent, so it's very disturbing. And for him, the 7 generations of his family were staying in that village, and they were running the same similar kind of business, and everything is lost. So he's very disturbed. Can you help him? So I mean, we had no, yeah, so we went there and he was very restless. The first thing we did was, like we didn't have any props. Our blankets had also not come. So there was a pillow. We put a pillow under his back, like we do for Shavasana, tied up his legs with our own belts and put some weight, whatever grains or material that was there, put it. And I think in 10-15 minutes, this man went to sleep. So, and we were very happy. And then he got up after another 20 minutes, looked fresh, and he smiled and he asked for his glasses and asked. And this lady who took us was in nearly tears. She's saying the first time he smiled in all these days and he wants to look at you. Can you come again tomorrow? We said, sure, because I mean, that's the purpose we had gone for. And then that evening, students started coming. So I guess first thing when we want to reach out to people is give them something which is strongly missing. And one of them is sleep, because when one has that, even a little sound disturbs people. So first thing. Second thing is message is that one should never get them to close their eyes, especially. So, this happened in January. We went there in February onwards. And then we had September 9/11 in New York. And that's the same time, I mean, this was man-made trauma in that sense. I mean, that was a very traumatic situation for people in New York, people in US, and to some extent the world, but more so in the US. So I asked Bobby Clennell and people whom I knew in New York, how are you all doing? How safe you are, etc. And she says, yeah, people are very traumatized, and there's a lot of fear naturally. So then I said, we had done this. Would you want to? I mean, I can share it with you what Guruji had advised us. So I sent them what all Guruji had told us, and then she wanted to share it with the whole of the Iyengar Yoga fraternity in the US. So Guruji updated it. So first message was that, so this was for the community. That was not for practitioners. Another tip that Guruji gave was, when there is a lot of fear, no closing eyes, even in Shavasana. Eyes should be open. Second thing is, imagine near your temples, there are eyes. So as if you have eyes here and you're opening out those eyes. So, this area, as if it's subjectively, it's opening, that gets the mind to become very quiet. So whether you are doing in Tadasana or you are in a sitting position, you can do it. So, and then of course, all the asanas where your emotional center is higher than the brain. So you sort of uplift it. So yeah, all poses like Rope Shirshasana, Viparita Dandasana, Setuban Sarvangasana. So all supported so you can stay longer. Even Uttanasana, Adho Mukha Svanasana to start with, and then all these. So these are the things which sort of give emotional strength, which is also there in Light on Life, also in the last pages he's written about it. So, but these were some of the clues that were there. And then actually, once we get into this mode, then things start moving normally. But it was mainly the beginning, the start. Once that flow comes in, people sort of get back to a normal routine. But this was an excellent idea which was there, because your mind stops thinking. Otherwise, the mind sways from the past to the future, the memories of the past, which are quite drastic, and then the anxiety of the future. So, like a pendulum, the mind is swaying, which creates so much of I would say, anxiety and disturbance to the mind. So, even sometimes when it becomes so bad, normal functioning gets affected. So I feel that these are the practices which really, really seem to help. So, those kind. So we have, of course, fortunately, all the props and the support, so one can even stay as long as one wants.
In your book, it says yoga can transform somebody. Can you elaborate on that term?
Okay. See, this is Guruji's quote that yoga does not change the way you see things, but it transforms the person who is seeing it. Now, that first let's understand the difference between change and transform. Change is something which happens and goes off. So it is like a high and a low, and it comes back to where you were. Transformation is a gradual change in such a manner that it is sustained and maintained over a period of time and builds up. So what yoga does is, so what a practices does is expected to transform us. Now, how does it happen? So let me start with something very, very basic. If somebody has a back pain, okay, and they come to class, nothing very severe, no accident, simple back pain. And as teachers of yoga, we will start them to extend their back. We may give them traction, or we may give them trikonasana, extending Ardha Chandrasana, depending on it. And they feel relief, twisting, Bharadwajasana, standing Marichasana, etc., Supta Padangushtasana, and they feel relief. Now, this relief is not going to be endless. They feel relief maybe during the class and for some time after the class is over. But it's not going to be all the time. Then again, they practice. The relief period increases from, say, 1 hour post class to 2 hours, 4 hours, and gradually they get rid of even the diseased pain. And possibly over a period, they develop the strength that they forget they had this back problem. Now, so what happens is that initially there is this transient effect which builds up over time. And that's where it brings. So similarly, what happens is with the temperament of people. So this is on the physical front. Now, mental front. Now, I'll just give you examples of people, say, who are smoking. Now, Guruji has never, ever advised people on food or habits. He's never said, stop smoking, stop drinking, you don't eat non-veg food, do this, do that. In fact, Guruji would say that the yamas, niyamas are not exactly like the 10 commandments, like do this, do that. Because moment you say, it will be there as long as the pressure is there or the force is there. Moment the force goes away, discipline goes away. So, so what he would say that the real freedom is when there is no pressure on you to do certain things. Then that is transformation. So if I have somebody, I will not cheat. But as long as I have the examiner standing behind me and looking at me. But the moment that examiner goes, if my tendency is to teach, I will teach. I will look around, oh, the examiner is far, I will teach. So that is transient. So if somebody looks at me at that point of time saying, oh, she's very honest, she doesn't cheat. But do I maintain that consistency? Now, how would that come? So what Guruji would tell is that when you continue practicing, you don't have this desire to cheat at all. So that's how the yamas become a part of you. So even if we study the yamas further, if you look at the Yoga Sutras and it says, speaking of Satya, Yoga Sutras are not saying speak the truth or be honest. Yoga Sutra says when you become established in Satya, when you become established in Asteya, that is, no stealing, then all the jewels are in front of you. So what they're saying is that you become so established in that aspect, there is no chance of you to sway in any direction. So that is what yoga does. So naturally, you are not swayed in this direction or this direction. So that is not just a change, it's a transformation. So that is what practice does. And if we talk in experiential, I know so many people, because say I started in the 70s and for many years till 2014, we had Guruji. So there were so many people with all kinds of habits, eating habits, and which gradually changed. And if you ask them, how did it happen? A person smoked. How did you stop smoking? You're saying, I don't know. It just happened. Now, what happened was that when it is intentionally done, you'll remember, oh, on my 30th birthday, 21st birthday, I took a decision, a resolution to change, to practice every day, to do this or not to do this. So that's something which you're doing with your willpower. So you will always remember. But when it has happened so gradually, you can't pinpoint. You may sort of relate it. Yeah, gradually, this habit went away. I didn't feel like doing it. I didn't feel like drinking or whatever it was, certain things. Or somehow my conscience started telling me I should do this every day. So that is the transformation. And that we saw in a lot of people who used to have not, I would say, very aggressive habits, but still habits. And that was the transformation. And now if we look, and that's possibly happened to everybody. Somewhere something struck us. I mean, we may have started yoga for something, but what is getting you to continue? Sometimes it's very difficult to answer if somebody asks you, why are you doing yoga? So if you had started with a purpose and say, I started yoga because I had a knee problem. Okay, fine. Do you have a knee problem now? No. Then why are you doing yoga? And we'll say, okay, I don't know why I'm doing yoga, but I'm doing it. And sometimes there's no reason. It's so much a part of you. So that is what happens. It sort of getting you deeper and deeper to our conscience. And now I had been reading a couple of studies that have been done. And I feel that the practitioners of Iyengar Yoga, they have done some PET scans. It's a very small study. And what they found is that the blood flow to different areas of non-practitioners and practitioners. It's a small group, very small group. But they have compared it is different. So, this area of the brain, prefrontal cortex, which is associated with multitasking, which is associated with executive functioning, decision making, is here. And they found more blood flow there. And then they found in the amygdala region, which is associated with fear, anxiety, post-traumatic stress disorder, the blood flow is less. So even if they've seen it in 4 patients who are 4 individuals, they're not patients, healthy individuals, relatively not a long-term practitioners, they're finding it. So I feel that it is actually playing upon your whole system somewhere. And that's how one gets transformed over a period of time. It's not magic. It's not overnight. And that's what yoga is. When we're practicing over the years, it sort of seeps into you. So that's, I think, how it possibly transforms you, or that's what I understand. I mean, this is my understanding. I don't know what really happens inside, but that's my understanding.
Okay. So ending in that note, we would like to know how you started your yoga practice and how it has transformed you, especially your relation, your practice with Guruji, any that is most significant that you can remember that made you a different person because of yoga practice.
I, I cannot answer that question because I didn't start yoga with any purpose. My father studied with Guruji, and 3-4 years later, he sort of introduced my elder brother Birju and my sister Nita to the classes. And then 2-3 years later, he got me to the classes. And every Sunday we went to the class, which still continues. So it's not the pandemic. Now we have online classes, but the Sunday class continues. So it was started something like that. So there was no purpose of motive to do yoga or any intention to do yoga, but it was something as routine, like going to school. You went to yoga class on Sunday morning. So that's how yoga started. And it just continued over the years. So I cannot say
Enjoy?
anything like a before, after.
Did you enjoy in your
Or,
first session?
I guess I must have. I think I don't have any, I mean, it's long ago. Yes, I must have enjoyed it because I don't remember ever complaining about it. Yes, I do remember very clearly that every week from Sunday to Thursday, there were new discoveries of muscles and pains in the body. Where it was difficult to climb stairs, you feel something you couldn't laugh, you couldn't, you'll have some pain or the other. So it wasn't unhealthy, but yes, you realized, oh, this muscle existed. So possibly all the muscles in the body, at least 25 to 40%, we actually understood where they were in that sense. That's the only thing. But apart from that, it was so, I would say, routine, that it was just natural. Sunday morning, get up, go to class, attend class, come back, and literally sleep the whole day through, because you were in school, there were no response, nothing to do, and slept through kind of thing for quite a while, and it just continued like that. So I don't have anything to talk about, like, how yoga has changed me or transformed me or made me any different, because you just lived with it. So I have no idea.
We have a
I
question
cannot
on
imagine what life would be without yoga. That is a question which I won't, which I can't, which I dread to imagine.
we have a question from the floor. If you can unmute and ask.
Carol, you raised your hand, right? Just now.
That was me, yes. Was it frightening to be in Guruji's class? Did you ever thought him as a scary teacher when you started, or he was just we hear a lot of stories and
In class, because the first yoga class that I ever saw was Guruji's. So I had no idea of what yoga is. That was the only yoga. And of course, I'd seen my father practice at home once in a while. But yes, Guruji was so commanding, so commanding. So his voice said something, your brain registered or your body registered. So there was no way of, trying to think of reasons or come out of the pose. Nothing. You just it He just said straight, and you were straight, or whatever straight I understood or my body understood then. So it was like that. So he was very he just went through not through your brain, but he directly went to your cells of your body. So he was very strong in that sense. In fact, I would say he would understand. So if he saw somebody was casual and was not as serious, he would possibly even ignore them. It appeared. He was watching them. But when this noticed seriousness, which only he could perceive, he could see, he would start guiding you and all. So most of the time, I think he was, you couldn't, your mind couldn't go here or there even for a fraction of a second. You were totally under his grip. And, like I remember in 1993, on his 75th birthday, we had a class of about 100 or 110 people in Panchgini. So it was a full day program for about 10 days. And even Trikonasan, Parshvakonasan, 5 minutes on each side. I can't ever imagine that I would have ever been able to do it. But even if you collapsed, you didn't, I don't know, you didn't have the courage, or possibly your brain was totally under his command, you couldn't move. You stayed there, whatever it is, you stayed. So that was that inherent will that was being generated. He was very strong. I mean, no doubt about it. But very compassionate, very compassionate. So if somebody was he could see through, So he said, okay, you're trying and you're not getting it. He would come and help you. He would use his own hands. He would use his back. He would go under and use his head, physically help people.
Right.
There were people very stiff and all. He would help. So it was. So you needed to have good fortune, because many people who came to the class actually left because, they saw it from outside and they thought that, oh, he's so strong. But what you see from outside and when you taste it, it is totally different. So those were the people I feel were unfortunate. They had an ego and they lost out. And then many of them came back after 10, 15 years. So I have students now who said that, Guruji was teaching and they had come to the class, but they somehow felt, oh, he's too strong. And then 25 years later, they joined their students, Guruji students class, and say, oh, I wish I had joined them. So I guess it is.
I have a list of questions on practice and therapy. So before we go into those details, any more questions from the participant here that you wish to know about the book, about yoga, about Rajvi ji? You can unmute and ask.
Yes, Viyun, I have a question to Rajviji. So, because I think many of us here, we never have a good fortune. We are never fortunate enough to have a chance to see Guruji in person. What we get to know Guruji is either we by looking at his video, by reading his books, or also through the editions of Yoga Rahasyas. So, what would you like to tell? Because there are more and more younger generations who may not have direct access to Gurujis. So what would you tell to us who never really have chance to get to Gurujis, and what are the essence that you think you can pass on to the next generations and we can learn and continue his spirits?
The first thing about Guruji was that his discipline. Amazing. I mean, never would he break away. So when it came to his own practice, for example, that point of time he practiced. Now, when he traveled abroad to teach, then even if they had a class, he would start his practice earlier. So one thing is his discipline. Even small things, he would always be there in the library at 2:30, like I said earlier. So very punctual. His punctuality, his discipline, his practice. I mean, he wouldn't leave his practice. And it was something which he always told us, that don't become mechanical in your practice. It is as bad as not practicing. Don't become mechanical. That's one thing. And to become very sensitive to what you're doing. And he was not doing yoga. I think he was fully immersed in yoga and Guruji were possibly never separate. It was so close to him. I mean, I wouldn't even say close. He was in yoga. So what can we talk about? So he often used to explain that what is, what exactly is yoga, that what is dharana, what is dhyana. And he would say, when the subject and the object become one. So you are doing something, you're focusing on things. When that becomes one, that exactly is the state of yoga. And we could see that. And I'll give you simple examples, and we sort of, like I said, for us, it was so routine that we didn't even really, I would be honest, because when you're seeing something from the age of 10, 12, and you're just seeing it every week, you don't realize how great it is, which you realize in hindsight. For example, Mumbai rains are quite famous, we have very heavy rains, and the city comes to a standstill. But he never would say that, June, July, August, which are the monsoons, he would come from Pune every weekend. And sometimes, there would be very few people in class because it has rained and people have not come. 15 people, but he would come from Pune. And now when you think back, it was not easy for him to come. Imagine, there was no super fast trains. He would, from the 80s onwards, 84 onwards, he would take a bus from Pune to Mumbai. There was no expressway. It went through the Ghats, so it would take sometimes 5, 6, 7 hours because monsoons things slowed down. 6 to 7 hours, then he would reach Mumbai. Actually, what he would do is he would take a train in the morning, reach Mumbai by about 12 or something, 11 or 12, then teach a class, and then spend some time in the hotel, or maybe some students would take him out. Next day morning, 7 to 9 class, and then he would take a bus back, which would mean that he would reach, say, about 2 o'clock or 4 o'clock in the evening. Now, maybe he did it in the 50s. He was new, he was building up yoga. He did it in 1990s. 97, 98, not as frequently, but he would still come to Mumbai till about 1996. And think of it, he was not young. He was in his 70s. So that was the kind of commitment that, that's one of the reasons that when somebody asked, did you not feel like, when you realize that he's so much senior, older, even with that ignorance, that if he can come all the way, how can we not go? So that level, and no complaints, never ever have I heard Guruji complain about anything ever. Nothing, no complaints. There was never any negative thing in his uh, thing, because, when we were writing the sports book and I was doing the initial writing, and I somewhere in the techniques, I said, do not do this, do not do this. Some techniques like these normally. He got very angry with me, saying, what is all this negative? Do not do. There are thousands of things, write what you should do. So then it got back, like, when I had gone to him with Yoga Rahasya and I said, this can be done and all. So that was his approach. And he never left anything for later. Everything was done at that time. So something had to be done. I mean, like one would have a thing, okay, we'll do it tomorrow. It's not so urgent. We'll do it in the evening. Oh, the deadline is far away. I can do it then. There was nothing like that for him. Smallest of things. I'll give you a very small, trivial example, but it is something, we often used to go from Mumbai to Pune for a weekend, or sometimes 2 days, Wednesday, Thursday. So Wednesday says, oh, you have come? Yes, sir. So are you there tonight? Yes, sir, I'll be leaving tomorrow after the class. And he says, oh, I have to send you some receipts. Now, that time, people would give donations to Belur and the receipts would come to Guruji. Now, imagine how trivial that work is. He could have just told somebody, Arey, she's there. Anyway, I was going to be there for the whole evening and next day. No, he would himself go down in the library. And then Belur Trust came in, so I'm talking of 2007 or 2008. So he was nearing 90. Okay. He would go climb up the first floor in the house, come back and give it. And you wouldn't know how to react. Like nothing, smallest of things, and then you say, Guruji, but I'm there. Get it done. So small things, and so compassionate. Like I had an opportunity. I didn't travel abroad much with him except to China, but yes, I did travel across, because I used to be living in Bangalore, and whenever he would come there, he would go. So small things he would take care. Oh, feed her this, she's new, she hasn't traveled yet, give her this vada and things like that. So he would be so careful about all those small things. Now think of it, yeah, you are such a non-existential student, who is nobody. and he would take so much care, so much compassion. And in class, he was different. I mean, it was impossible to cope up with him. I can tell you that I doubt whether how many people would be able to cope up with him consistently. Like in the therapy classes, you would go from one end of the hall to the other. And by the time you figure out what has happened to this person, he's already moved somewhere else. It's so quick, so quick. And then he would say, I have slowed down. And you wonder, if this is slow, I can't imagine how to. Very quick in things. And he could not accept people who would do things casually. That was unacceptable. I mean, okay, just doing things for the sake of doing, which even Geeta ji, she could not tolerate anybody who had even a slightest casual approach. For her, you do it totally from your heart, from your soul, from your brain, in totality. There cannot be anything done, superficially. Like once I was to, it was very, very, I mean, just a few years before, some talk, and she said, so you're going to be speaking today on Hanuman Jayanti? I said, yes, Vitaji. So what I am planning to speak on this. Okay, how long? So I said, whatever time is given to me, because I was not sure whether I was allocated 30 minutes or 20 minutes or whatever time. She got angry and she says, what are you talking about? So I said, no, whatever. You have to give what you have to give. Don't just, there is a phrase in Marathi, like on a slate, just don't put chalk and think you have done your job. So don't do something like that. And I said, yes, Geetaji, I didn't mean like that. So you can see that they had this, all these attributes. So they were, what people say you should be one with what you do, they were like that. Totality. I mean, and the compassion of Guruji and his energy. Oh, I don't know how he got it, because when you actually saw him eat, and I'm talking, say, 1990s, 2000, he barely ate. But I don't know, he had amazing amount of energy, and in the hall, and so. I mean, so I feel apart from the classes, there was so much to learn, or just, you went there and just spent some time with him, and you would come back charged, energized, even if you were normal, that monotony would break. So just go there, spend even 15 minutes with Guruji in the library, where it was very easy to meet him, and he was always easily accessible in the hall. And it just charged you, just being there. So now you sort of understand when people say there's an aura or whatever it is, I don't know what it is, but something you would say, and a lot of his things would come, just sitting library, somebody would come to interview him or talk to him, and nothing was closed. He was transparent, absolutely open. So whoever was there got the benefit of it. So, you may have nothing, you may be an absolute new person sitting there. So people would always be waiting there, and you don't know what. And it could even be Shirshasana there in the library hall, and you've just had nice lunch at 1:30, the ladies class has got over, and saying, Guruji, I have had lunch. So yes, so okay, take this pillow and there you are. So it was like that. So I think there were so many things about him. I remember once in China, it was, he called and saying, why are you all people eating alone? So everybody was called to his room, and he thought, after the 3-hour class that he had taught, he would be tired. But well, and then suddenly people were eating, and he asked Abhijata, okay, now do Veerabhadrasana too. So box of food she keeps aside, there is still food in her mouth, and then she's doing Veerabhadrasana too. But he had anything, immediately he would. Of course, we were not asked to do while eating or ever, but Abhijata obviously was special, and she had. So he was totally, totally, fully into yoga. So that was Guruji. I mean, you often miss him, but at the same time, like I said, you learn to perceive things, that all these things are there with you. They have sort of gone into you. Yeah.
Okay. Let me ask, there's one question from Irene in Singapore. She's asking, is it important to learn the yoga poses first before as a student learns to meditate? Before it learns to meditate. So asana before meditate. So her question also follows, I understand meditation brings peace, which is helpful during periods of lockdown. When there is so much mental suffering, apart from financial issue. So how do we progress?
Uh, See, I'll give you two to three different situations. First is the actual understanding of what Guruji has explained. So he called how Guruji has explained Ashtanga Yoga. So he said Yama Niyama is the art of living. How do you lead your life? So if you lead your life following the principles of Yama and Niyama, then asanas, pranayam, he said, is the science. So where you can experiment, and you can sort of get your experiences, but it's an experimental science. So it's a science, like a science. And pratyahara, dharana, dhyana are experiential. So it is where you cannot be taught, you can only experience. The moment I speak out, then I'm coming from the brain. So it's not experiential, then it is objective. So asanas and pranayam are something which can be done. And pratyahara, dharana, dhyana, pratyahara to some extent is like a boundary. I would say it can be done through when we are, through shavasana, etc. And dharana and dhyana are experiential, which we can only experience. So even if I say I want to meditate, I may have a desire to meditate, but whether I meditate or not is not in my hands. Because when I have desire, you cannot meditate. Because meditation is a state where you are, as dhyana in Ashtanga Yoga, it's a state where you are so absorbed. So that it's an experience, it's a feeling. I cannot enforce any feeling. I cannot force you to like me. I can force you to listen to me. I can force you to sit in front of me, but I cannot force you to like me. Yes, you will put a like on social media, but what your emotions are, they remain yours. They cannot be enforced. Your feelings can never be enforced. You may express it, but what you feel inside cannot be. So you cannot say, love this person. So similarly, if you want to become quiet, we cannot force ourselves to be quiet. So if I will tell somebody and get you into, say, a Supta Baddha Konasana, or say Setubandh Sarvangasana or Viprit Karni, mind becomes quiet, right? We've all practiced it. Or supported forward bends, mind starts getting quiet. Now, at the same time, if I ask you to sit and say, be quiet, be quiet, be quiet, what will happen is that your mind doesn't become quiet by me telling you to be quiet. In fact, at some point, you'll get more irritated. Say, no, no, don't think of anything, don't think, don't think. So you will start thinking more when I say don't think. Or you will get, so if like somebody is angry and you say, no, no, don't get angry. That person is not even angry actually. But I feel that the person is angry. And I'll say, oh, Vyun, don't get angry. Huh? It's okay. So you'll say, no, no, I'm not angry. No, no, don't get angry. Don't get angry. Finally, you will get so angry, you'll say, stop this nonsense kind of thing. So similarly, when you want to make a particular part, you don't directly act on that part. You act on the surrounding areas. So if I want to act on the mind, if I want to have an effect on the mind, I don't have to act on the mind, I act somewhere else. So when I act on the body, now body and mind is not separate. How can we separate body and mind? Whatever we do, our mind tells our body to do. If I say raise my hand, my instruction, it is my mind tells me. And whatever the body does has an influence on the mind, that we know. We do certain fast movements, you do quick rope work, you do Surya Namaskar, your mind becomes fresh. There's so much quick body movements, the mind becomes fresh. If you do supported, say, Sukta Virasana, you feel energized. If you do Setubandh Sarvangasana, Viprit Dandasana, you feel energized. If you do the Supta Baddha Konasana, when you're very tired, or Viprit Karni, you feel relaxed. So there are poses which relax you. There are poses which rejuvenate you. There are poses which charge you. So there are different levels. So the poses, when I say it's not just on the body, they act on the mind. So therefore, when we want to get into a state of, so people believe, they say when you are quiet, in fact, when person is quiet, the thoughts are most. Because we get people saying, I want to meditate, but my mind wanders. So obviously you can't meditate. But you can get into an absorbed state where you get into a state of meditation. So when somebody feels that the mind is very disturbed, or you want to do it in the situations of pandemic, then you do these kind of asanas. So that is where you are utilizing asanas to quieten the mind, or like I said, the fluctuating mind or the anxious mind. On the other hand, there is no pandemic, there is nothing, you are normal, but you want to get into the other states of Ashtanga Yoga. So when you get absorbed, and that is done like by focusing and feeling the awareness spread. So when initially we do the asanas with our limbs, with our head, with our trunk, then we start feeling the connections. So even if I say extend the arm, one I've just extended, now I elongate, now I see, I feel connected from the shoulder right to the tips of the fingers. And then what happens? My mind is moving with my awareness. That becomes my mind flowing with my consciousness. Now, each asana, when that happens, the mind becomes absorbed in with the flow of the awareness. And therefore, it naturally gets quietened. So it is like, so you don't quieten your mind directly. You do things, and through asanas, the mind gets into that quietened state. I hope I'm able to get it across what I'm trying to say. So meditation would be an experiential. So it's very important that you start with asanas. Otherwise, we can be under an illusion. I'm sitting quiet, but it's not meditation. Meditation is not a state where the mind is quiet. Meditation is a state when all aspects of there is uniform absorption all over. So there is absolutely zero dualities. Is that clear?
Yes, very well explained. Thank you. So we have the next question is from Sivanesan, Malaysia. He asking, if one practices 1 hour or less than 1 hour, does it still give the same amount health benefit mentioned in the text?
Let's leave the texts, because the text is very terse. If you're talking of the Yoga Sutras, that text was written 2,500 years ago. The text even doesn't mention any asana. It doesn't mention, it says Stiram Sukham Asanam. It doesn't even mention Stiram Sukham Shirshasan or Stiram Sukham Urdhva. So let's leave that. But what the text says is that whatever you do, you need to get sthirata. And it doesn't happen overnight. It doesn't happen with 1 day or 2 days. But if I would tell you, the immediate benefits, if one talks about, comes in the very early stages. So I'll give you an example. One is very raw and one has just started yoga. And, you give them 1 week. So if you do, say, a week session, 1.5 hour class, very systematically, by the end of the week, they'll find a big change because the body has not done anything. They're healthy. They haven't done anything. And suddenly they say, oh, Uttanasana, I can do so much. Oh, I can turn so much, So you see the physical change coming in. But to sustain that, so that's why we generally don't recommend anybody to do classes 7 days a week. Beginners, never. Because it's a high enthusiasm. And like Guruji would say, I don't like enthusiastic people. It's high and it will come down also. Down. So leave it. So what you do is, say, okay, you're coming to class regularly, twice a week, enough. Don't think of doing it at home. Leave yourself, submit yourself to your teacher. Whatever you have done, like I said, we started once a week. For at least, I think, 6-7 years, it was once a week. That was all that we did. But of course, it was once a week, 2 hours with Guruji, equivalent to 20 hours or maybe 40 hours of my practice. But so just start like that. Then gradually, after some time, you will desire that, no, I want to do something, which is not coming from the brain. Brain would be like I said, a New Year resolution, which in 95% of the people possibly vanishes by 10th of January, and some people maybe end of January. I have hardly come across anybody who's completely met all their New Year's resolutions. So we don't want it like that. So we said, okay, then afterwards do little by little. Don't live off the outcomes, because then you're not in yoga if you're looking at the desired effect. So start, and then you will gradually proceed. Then after some time, it will be that you want to do it every day. Then you will realize that, okay, now I want to do these things. So you are growing from within rather than the dictates from outside. So start practice. Don't think, because the moment you think of the benefits, then you're moving away from yoga, because yoga says that we should be in a desireless state. With abhyasa comes vairagya. That's in the first chapter. Abhyasa, vairagya, tan nirodha. Both have to go together. So if I have only abhyasa to reach a destination, then after reaching the destination, I'll be lost. There'll be vacuum. What do I do next? Then you will have more ambition. Okay, I have stayed, now I will stay Shirshasana half an hour. I have achieved it. Then what? So we don't want to get that. So along with that, just be, so the feeling part becomes very important after a while. So as a beginner, don't worry too much about how many hours. Let the discipline come within you, emerge within you, then your practices will last longer. That's what I can say from my own experience of, I don't know whether it was good or bad, or I was indifferent or ignorant, but well, possibly if I would have tried to imitate what I did in Guruji's class every day, possibly I wouldn't have survived 6 months also.
Okay. His second question is about Iyengar style uses prop for correct alignment. Some other school request us not to stop practicing although alignment is not correct. One day we will into correct position for those who don't have prop. Is that still correct? The question.
See, first of all, it is it is absolutely incorrect to believe that props are for alignment. Props have multiple purposes. It is an alignment it's something which has been taken very superficially, understood that because our body by itself, we are not aligned. Our left and right side of the body are not aligned. We are definitely, we have our polarities. Organically, it is not balanced. What is there on the right, what is there on the left. But what we are trying to say is that your feeling should be balanced, your awareness should be uniform, and that is what is the alignment. So the prop helps you understand. So now if I'm sitting against a wall and I'm sitting and I realize, I may not even realize, but oh, my this shoulder and this shoulder distances, that means my neck is there. So it guides me. So yes, to some extent, the other purpose of the prop is it helps us to stay, it develops intelligence, it helps up in all the physiological effects. And I mean, we can imagine if doing Viprit Dandasana for 10 minutes without a prop. So there are various purposes. Now, why people say use or not use? Well, whole of light on yoga, there is, I remember only one prop. There is no picture of a prop. So it's not that Iyengar yoga is props. There is not, it is not at all, because unless light on yoga is written by Guruji, there are the props. So it is not that, and it's we should be using it intelligently. We should not use it like a crutch. Yes, if you're using it for therapeutic purposes, we are unwell, we need the prop, fine, we definitely use it. But apart from then, let us not use it as a crutch all the time. Yes, I would admit that I'm feeling very lazy today, I'm feeling tired. I would prefer well supported and lie down. That's different. So if people say that, you're dependent or props, I think we should not be bothered about it. Go with your own sensitivities, evolve your sensitivities. That gives us viveka khyati, that is discriminative intelligence. Then we don't need anybody else to tell us, you know, whether you are right, whether you are wrong, what is this, because you are taking your own decisions. Even if in hindsight, you appears that, oh, I should have done things, you will have the ability to withstand the decision you have taken. So I think that is what is important. Don't go on what others say, go by what you feel. And that's why I said in the beginning, for a couple of years, just be submissive to your teacher. Follow, learn to your teachers, whether or you're learning from Guruji's videos or his books. Just follow. Let's leave our brains behind. Then we'll develop our sensitivity. Then we will be guided by our sense. Then we don't need justification. This is it. So that's what I would say. I hope it answers the question.
His next question is what we call as overdo in yoga practice.
Yeah, I guess sometimes like this whole thing, what I talked about enthusiasm, and some, see, overdoing can be on one, the qualitative front, one can be quantitative front. So sometimes it's for youngsters, it's great to break the barrier. So 15-year-old, 18-year-old, 20-year-old, like you will stay, come what may, because that develops their willpower. That willpower makes them established. So one will not sway with pressures. You stand by yourself. So that is one. But that same willpower can become determination. But that same willpower, if we keep it, you can become rigid. And when you are rigid, people around you are not going to like you. You should be adaptable to the surrounding. So that is something which we have, that for example, there was this thing that I have to practice and I want to come to Pune. For example, I remember long back, and this person said they had got admission after 3 years of wait or 4 years of wait, and in the meanwhile she got pregnant and she had a kid, and then they left that 15-day-old kid and came to Pune. Now that I feel is rigidity. Or I remember my sister was mentioning in a class that I don't want to miss practice. So 4th day after birth, she brings that 4-day-old baby to class and comes to class. Now that I call rigidity in practice. Because you may want to do, first of all, you're not supposed to do, and add on, you're exposing a 4-day-old baby. So, that's where we need something which seems common sense. So that's what I meant, is that we should be balanced. I mean, after all, what is yoga? Samatvam, equanimity, balance, not just in our asanas. So I think one should not. So yes, sometimes you may want to challenge yourself, go ahead, but don't make it routine. So that's, I would say, overdo, because then overdo qualitatively, you can injure yourself. That is possible, that I will do Hanumanasana, come what may, and then sit with, and the body is not toned, and sit with an injured hamstring, and then 6 months stop doing all forward extensions because the back of the thigh is going to hurt so badly with the pulled hamstring. So I guess one, and it's a very fine line. So you do overdo sometimes, you bear the consequences, you learn next time. So because that also teaches us. I mean, all of us would have done some overdoing sometimes and then realized it. So it's okay, but don't make it a habit.
Mhm. The next question is from Pamela from Chile. How do you deal with students that express frustration in their own process?
I mean, frustration in practice, I guess that's what she's saying.
Yeah.
See, frustration, I guess, primarily for anything comes when your expectations are not met. It's either your own or somebody's else's expectations on you, maybe your colleague or your boss. So as far as practice is concerned, one of the biggest lessons I learned from Guruji is on ambition. And I remember asking him, I said, Guruji, we say we shouldn't have desires. That means you won't be ambitious. Fine. But then would that not make us very, indifferent, lazy? Because, I have nothing to look, wanting to do. Then, what's the fun of it, kind of? No, no. So he said, no, you have the first ambition, one ambition or one aim. Once you get it, what you do, what normally we do, we will go for a second aim, third aim. And that's where you have, endless desires, and there is always dissatisfaction or vacuum, either two. So once you achieve it, there's a high, oh, I did this. After that, it comes back to normal, then vacuum. So I like to give this very simple example, which is, or an analogy is exams, school kids. There is such a high final exam, studying hard. Moment the exams are over, they're very happy. After that, there's vacuum because there's nothing to do. And during the exam preparation period, they have lots of things they want to do. Whole checklist is there. But after that, after a few days, it's like a balloon which is fizzled out. Or the results come in, you're very happy. But after a while, it settles down. I mean, nothing remains. So everything comes down. So that's why I have the first ambition. And after that, so when it comes to students, don't give any kind of expectations, goals. Somehow I don't believe in that. I believe more in acceptance and seeing whether my today was better than yesterday. If it was not, then okay, what had happened? Fine, leave the analysis. Let's see what happens tomorrow. So then there is not much, because moment we have set a target, we are pushing ourselves. We are not enjoying, what one would say, the cliched, enjoyed the journey and not the destination. It's a very view statement often said. So well, let us not get into, and I don't want to say repeat that again, but let us be involved in what we are doing. Then there is less scope of frustration. So if a student is there, okay, and frustration could possibly, what she's saying is also manifestation of restlessness. because a lot of students are restless, they will not be able to stay and they'll be looking here and there. That means their mind is wandering. Sometimes there is physical pain, sometimes the mind is wandering. So then put them in certain poses with supports. So mind starts calming down. Tie up the legs, like when the abdomen is soft, mind starts quietening. So if a person is extremely restless, give them supported shavasana or much height like simhasan with the simhasan bench and tie up the thighs and let them stay. Then gradually, they'll settle down. So that's how it could be. So if it is a transient thing, you handle it. If it is regular, then you sort of build up the practice. Don't give them sort of another thing. Possibly frustration may come in. I do not know how situation is in Chile or here, but we have new people coming into regular classes. So we have ongoing classes, and somebody who has done for short time comes in. So there may be somebody who's practiced for 25 years and somebody who's done it for 2 months. So sometimes they get frustrated looking at the others. So that's where we need to communicate to them that what they need to do and things like that. So it depends on the cause of frustration and one can handle it accordingly.
Okay. Top 3 suggestions how not to practice.
How not to practice? Well, I would again, I think how to and how not to is not appropriate, because there are a lot of things not to be done. Simplest, which any teacher or any student would say, don't eat and go and practice immediately. Or you can say, don't get up in the middle of the night and practice. But no, not making light of the statement. I think it totally depends on you, your state. We have to remember to respect our body. That's, I think, which is very important, because we could be in different states of health. We are human. We may be practicing, we may be very sincere, we could fall sick, which is possible. So I think we cannot be so rigid and say, I have to do it. So one thing is to learn to listen to your body. So that is, developing the sensitivity. And the other thing is listening and respecting the body and the mind. So that's one. And apart from that, I think it all depends on your health status, your age, the environment, things like that. So I would only say that let your practice not be mechanical, at least routinely mechanical. Ideally, it shouldn't ever be. But I do admit that sometimes when we are not fully for it, we would rather do a mechanical practice than not practice at all. So yes, but then let those phases be lesser. And the other is to learn to listen and respect the body. So, and not be very rigid, because that's something which is dangerous when we become very rigid, in not physically we become flexible, but mentally we become, it is like this only. No, there are many ways of doing it. So if Guruji taught Trikonasana in this way today, it may be totally opposite next day. Because, and you must have heard the story many times when Guruji was teaching something, and next day the student, therapy in the therapy class, and the next day the assistant did the same thing. And saying, who asked you to do this? Guruji said yesterday. That was yesterday. Today is today. So, we need to be dynamic in that sense.
We have a question from Agnes Tan, Malaysia. I have long, short leg. Left leg is shorter by 12 millimeter. May I know what's the main area I need to constantly aware of, and what is the yoga pose I need to practice diligently to achieve correct body alignment by using the correct strength for each foot? Look
So
to your yes. She wants to know how she should practice.
Okay. Oh, I mean, it's little difficult to answer without seeing the person. These are very practical questions. But one thing I would say is, and we don't know why it has happened. Maybe it was inborn, or if it's nearly 12 millimeters, it could be some accident or some injury somewhere. I don't know. But one thing one can do is, here the feeling of alignment would help a lot. So especially Tadasana, standing poses, try to get the same feeling that you got, say, in doing Trikonasana on the left. Supposing the right is shorter. then what is the feeling on the left, and try to get that. So possibly that's the, subjectively to work on it more than the poses. So whichever pose you do, like it would be easier in standing asanas, both feet on the ground. You could try it in Supta Padangushtasana, Supta Tadasana, feet against the wall, because here the prop, the wall will guide. But say it may be difficult in Shirshasana, because even our so-called normal legs also are up, sometimes a couple of millimeters up and down when we do Shirshasana, because we can't see it. So maybe there also she can go with feeling, to try to see how she can maximally extend from the muscles and the joints. So when the muscles of the legs elongate, because what could happen, and I don't have experience, but what I can visualize is that when one foot is shorter, then it will not touch as evenly as it would the other in Tadasana, right? When one is standing. So naturally, the muscles of that affected will not extend as much as the one which is touching, because it doesn't have contact, right? So if you're doing Tadasana and when we say completely spread your feet, you find a different kind of extension. But when you're casually standing, you find as if there is a drop. So that is, and then she can, of course, use a little bit of support, which I think she said she's using a little support. So which acts like an extension of the foot sometimes. So that can also help.
Mhm. So Agnes, if you are here, I can't find. Next question, Ashley Chow, Malaysia. Does the practice of yoga improve one's immune system?
Uh, Well, honestly, I find it a little difficult to answer this question, because with my academic training, when I say it improves, then I need evidence to show how it improves. When I say evidence is, actual experimental evidence, when I'm talking in that sense. But I would say that yes, if also specifically how, I do not know. But one thing I would say is that by practicing regularly, if we can see the changes in our other systems, we can see the changes in, the digestive, circulatory. So obviously the immune also gets affected. And for me, the biggest example would be, obviously for all of us, would be Guruji, because we know he suffered from so many infections, obviously a compromised immune system. But later, I don't recollect him from the time that he ever felt sick with any kind of an infection. So yes, his immune system would have developed, which was very bad if he had got all the possible infections in his childhood, or not even childhood, till his teenage years, So yes, it does, because I mean, all systems are fed well, so it would be affecting. But
Now, how to handle neck problem? Joanne from Malaysia.
For this, I'm sure your teacher would be able to help you. And if the teacher wishes, she can directly get in touch with me. I can guide the teacher, because it's easy to explain, practically this kind of things, because neck problem is definitely a very common thing with this last 1 year. People working from home, neck forward, literally getting into physical activity. So the neck muscles shorten. If you're a regular practitioner, simplest of things would be, of course, Paschim Namaskaras and Gomukhasan, elongating the neck, and the best, or Uttanasan, interlocking the fingers behind. So, and you elongate the neck. And the best, of course, if you are familiar, then, with two chairs doing Shirshasana on the shoulder, so the neck gets released. And most of the neck problem is also because of the shoulder and the trapezius shortening. So the trapezius start shortening at the back. So nothing better than the back bends, which help release the neck. So it's basically working on the extension, because it's quite common these days. I think a lot of people are suffering. Say, even if you do a Viprit Dandasana and make sure that the trapezius does not hit towards the shoulders but gets stuck to the chair, and then also the neck gets released.
Mhm. Um, I won't go into the details with some of the therapeutic because you're not seeing them. So there's
Yes.
this question here, say post-COVID recovery, please highlight the yoga advantages.
Okay. See, now actually, the symptoms that people are having post-COVID are so variable, from the lungs to the heart, etc. Because like I said, again, it depends on the intensity of COVID and the symptoms. So if there is a lot of fatigue, one thing that has definitely come up is, all the forward, when you're bending forward and getting the anterior body totally pressed. So it could be in Adho Mukha Virasana, fully pressed, or it could be like you're sitting on a chair and Pavan Muktasan with another chair in front of you and pressing. I would in fact recommend that the IYA UK has created a full booklet on post-COVID recovery. So in case you don't have it, I can share it with you, can share it with the people. But what would do is, since it's the lungs are affected post-COVID, which was what was earlier, is then all the forward Anantasan, chest opening doesn't work in many people. Purvatanasan, Setuban, especially Purvatanasan work. But I have found that many people find Viprit Dandasan, Setuban, where the top shoulders are lower, very difficult. So for them, maybe best would be to start with Simhasan, bench, Shavasana, very high bench, Purvatanasan, all the front bending where the prone Shavasana or full supported bolster Adho Mukha Virasana and Anantasan. So you're basically working on all aspects of the lung, the back, the front. Then you can see, once if people feel comfortable, then we can add, say, Setuban Sarvangasana, much later Viprit Dandasana. So yes, no standing, and yes, Adho Mukha Svanasana. So, it's a very difficult to give a generic prescription, because one, it will depend on whether the person is a practitioner or a teacher. So a teacher has, much more years and experience. And if it could be a practitioner, or it could be somebody new, or they want to ask for some of their family members. So it's a little tricky question for me to answer. But in general, I think supported prone, supported back, supported side, it's the simplest to start with. And then always, for any kind of therapy, have listen to the patient. Observe the patient, not just the words, observe whether they're comfortable or not.
Any more question coming from the floor?
Yeah, can I ask one question, Bune?
Yes.
Yeah, Rajvi, I would like to ask a question from a woman perspective. Okay, your journey from young till now, what are the challenges as a woman, especially with the changing of hormonal and everything? How does a woman go through this? What's your best advice for this kind of problem?
I think personally, I haven't seen those changes. But having taught, I think that first level would be, for a young person, I think, the menstrual pain, etc., which is, we all know. I mean, I think anybody who practices knows the benefits of Baddha Koan and, Pavishta Koan and Ardha Chandrasana. But otherwise, I feel that, it's not even easy to handle. Personally, I have no experience. It just, everything was pretty smooth. And but again, I have never been pregnant, so I can't talk about that aspect. But having taught a lot of people, I think the practice just makes these transitions very smooth. So like, it's not felt as transitions. But again, the very important aspect is that we need to listen, which sometimes what happens is that people see it as a change. And when you're resilient to change, oh, I cannot change, so they become more aggressive. So say menopausal time, and they say, oh, I'm feeling stiff and I should do more. Let the body settle down to the changing environment, and then you can get back. So sometimes, people tend to push. That's where the problems occur. Like that extreme example I gave you post birth, when somebody wants to come in with a 4-day-old. So those extremities should not be there. That kind of fanatism should not be there. But apart from that, yes, I mean, and we have to understand the hormonal changes, which is natural. Also, the emotional changes would come with the hormonal changes, all those things. So I guess if the whole thing is that practice brings more adaptability, I feel. So, if there's more acceptance, then you don't see the change as much. But if you are rigid and things are changing, things are moving and you are here, that's where the conflict starts. But if you are also able to sort of accept it, then it's much easier, or rather it's not a issue. And of course we do have, yes, I mean, for every, there would be problems. And then, we have all the tools with us. We know different poses help us in different conditions. So yes, and people have a lot of spotting or something like that, then you have the role of inversions. So, sometimes for irregular cycles, and what poses need to be done at that point of time. So it sort of adapts. So I think, like I said, it actually traverses all, even to some extent, the differences at some point. You sort of manage to overcome them.
While we're at this topic, because I actually came across this article that says about doing Shirshasana while you're having menstruation. And the article says if an astronaut goes to away from Earth where there's no gravity, they are going upside down. So the cycle actually doesn't change. So it doesn't affect by gravity apparently. So it's a very physical thing. It will happen even if you're upside down, your menstruation flow will just go naturally because it's your body functioning. So just like, because most of the time when we are having menstruation, we are not advised to go to Shirsasana. So based on that point, what is your view about it?
First and foremost, like I said, I started, we were allowed to do all the asanas except inversions during our periods right from the beginning. And I know that recently, I think in the last 1 year or 2 years, and that was routine. Another thing we were not to definitely not do was, balancing asanas during periods, or navasan, ardha navasan, wherever one could grip the abdomen. So those were definitely no. However, and of course, intense twistings like Marichasan 3 or Ardha Matsyendrasan or Parivrata Trikonasana, Parivrata Parshvakonasana. But apart from that, we did all the asanas. However, now if you see, people during menstruation, or if you've been to Pune, they'll always be doing a restorative sequence at the side. Now, the thing is that because you are getting students of all kinds, and some people, and especially in a large class, can become quite aggressive and unknowingly, and you can start gripping your abdomen. And that's why you do poses where your abdomen remains soft, so you're not taking a chance. But otherwise, say a Trikonasana, it's not going to harm you. But I could be doing Trikonasana, gripping my abdomen. So now, to ensure safety, it is universal, like avoid certain asanas when you're menstruating. As far as the inversions are concerned, I know in the last 2-3 years, there has been a lot of this discussion why inversion should not be allowed. Why should you stop doing inversions? Uh, Now, one of the reasons is I remember when having this discussion with Geetaji also. One of the possibilities they say is that yes, there is a specific path, and the endometrium, the uterine lining would during menstruation would be thrown off with response to the prostaglandins, etc., and it has its own cavity through which it would be discarded, and that inversions is not going to physically affect it. But what happens is, again, I said, possibly gripping the abdomen. And, certain things, like I said, we don't have physiological evidence, but we go by the experiential evidence of our ancestors or our teachers who have said, and there must be a reason, because inversions were never allowed, Geetaji, from, Geetaji's mother's time, etc. So I sort of do have a lot of respect for certain traditions, which must be based on experience. And I love giving analogies. And to me, an analogy would be cooking. There were no cookbooks in the time of my mother, or definitely not in the time of my grandmother, but they were better cooks than me. So doesn't mean that nothing that is not written or does not have scientific proof did not exist, because certain things, so that's there. But I think when there is also this fear of retrograde, menstruation, which, you know, if the endometrial tissue which is being thrown out is left behind, then after the periods end, and when again the hormones start coming up, there will be growth of that tissue there, which is a diseased condition like endometriosis, wherein the uterine tissue, which you know, should grow on the inner lining of the uterus, can grow in any part of the body, sometimes in the fallopian tubes, sometimes even on the ovaries. So possibly what could be happening is that if there is a good, you know, if there is a lot of flow and we are holding it by going upside down. I mean, it's common sense, you know, if you are wanting to urinate or something, yes, it is not happening purely by gravity, but if you're going to go upside down, you can't. So it's something like that. So if you're going, you could be triggering such a situation. And you don't want to trigger a situation where the bits and pieces of the uterine tissue, endometrial tissue is left somewhere and could possibly lead to problems later on. Even if it is in 5%, I think it's very important that it should, we don't know who those 5%, why should we even take a chance? And it doesn't matter if for 3 days you're not doing your inversions, or 4 days you're not doing Shirshasana or Sarvangasana. So I feel that at least totally agree on the inversions, the abdominal asanas where we tend to grip, and also even intense twistings or intense back bends. For otherwise healthy women, I'm not talking about those who have issues, but otherwise healthy women, it is surely avoidable. I mean, it shouldn't be done.
There's no more questions. People on the floor, any more casual questions you would like to ask Rajvi ji? Maybe like what she had for lunch just now.
No, it's past. I think it's time for their tea. It's tea and coffee break. They said it's virtual coffee, so it's time for their coffee.
Yeah. Chin Chin, if you're there, you want to share your condition? You want to talk about it? Nope, nobody has any questions.
Maybe you can let me know, and maybe there are some new people around, that how has Iyengar Yoga grown in Malaysia? What triggered the interest, and what aspect? Because Iyengar Yoga has so many, you know, maybe anybody has so many aspects. So, you know, each culture seems to have been attracted to certain specific aspects. So I'm just curious because you are relatively newer, you know, East Asia, relatively compared to the West. So maybe it would be nice to sort of few people sharing at what aspect really touches apart from the world doing it.
There are a few people asking if you teach online class.
Yeah, just for the Light on Yoga Research Trust, 2 classes a week. That's it. That's my teaching.
And also question on how they can get to learn with you.
You can learn with anybody. All qualified teachers of Iyengar Yoga listed on bksiyengar.com.
Get to your class, your online class.
No, we are, like I said, apart from some invitations here and there to teach for a specific group. Otherwise, I'm just teaching regular classes, which we were teaching before the pandemic. Otherwise, like sometimes, like Belur had a session, so never, or some country, some association has asked, so I've taught a couple of them, or some institute. But apart from that, yes, I'm not teaching so much online.
So if there's no question, before we end the session, maybe you can and tell us some interesting things relating to the book, which was launched in April.
Yeah, February. Maybe I'll throw a question, and for those who have not read it, Like if you had, and I understand there are teachers here, so I'll throw this question to the teachers. Okay, so you are asked to get a person to do Ardha Chandrasan. So with a Tressler, so I guess it is understood. How would you do it? And if the person has only one leg, then how would you do Ardha Chandrasan?
Teachers,
Yeah,
please come forward.
maybe you know who the teachers are. So whoever is there,
A lot here.
not here.
Umi, Teacher Nancy, Teacher Van.
Azumi is here.
Yes.
See, if the person has one leg, how many times would you get Ardha Chandrasan? Would you have the alignment and do it on the, how would you do it? Because I face this question. So,
Teacher Mei Song, Teacher Mei Wong.
I guess if the person is only having one leg, then it's only one side it is possible, and then the other absent leg, it's just kind of imaginary legs that he
yeah,
could get supported. And of course, a block supported for the hands or the chair supported for the hands, and then the absent legs is supported on the Tressler. I don't know,
okay.
because I never experienced.
Yeah. So that's true, and that's what I did. So this happened in a therapy class in Pune, and this man walked in with crutches, and his leg was amputated middle of the thigh onwards. And he came to therapy because he had a back problem. So Guruji said, make him do Ardha Chandrasan. This is way back in time. So I made him very happily, and he was very cooperative. So like you said, I supported the stump of the leg onto the Tressler, put something above and supported it. And he stayed, and I'm waiting. And then Guruji said, yes, make him do Ardha Chandrasan. So I repeated it. And after some time, he said, what about the other side? I said, what other side, Guruji? I mean, one leg, one side. There is no leg on the other side to make him do Ardha Chandrasan on the other side. So he got very angry and he says, what are you saying? You know, his back is hurting. Then, yes, but I mean, what to do? Then you see, because when the other leg is missing, when that person talked about short leg, you see, when you don't have any, of course, this is extreme, but when you don't have any contact, I talked about the leg shrinking. So in this case, also because of the stump, the lower back was shortening, and that's why he had a lot of pain. So that leg needed to be extended. So therefore, he was made to do Ardha Chandrasan, where a stool and a bolster was kept as an extension of the leg. So now he was actually standing on that stump with a stool and a bolster, and then the good leg was taken up on the Tressler. And then he got so much relief in the back. So, you know, these are certain things which we feel that when the limb is gone, we've heard about, you know, the phantom limbs, where you feel that, you know, when a person has lost their leg, they imagine that the leg exists. There's a condition like that. But beyond that, there is, you know, when we lose contact with any surface, then there is a shortening, tremendous shortening on that side. And that's one of the reasons of pain. So even when we are practicing or teaching, it becomes very important of that contact area. So that's again what the supports teach us. So, you know, this was something which I've narrated with reference to something else. But it's like all of you, possibly that's the same way we all think. You know, we don't think, obviously, we are not Guruji to think like him. But it was very interesting to, you know, realize this, that when the leg doesn't exist, how that whole side of the body gets affected. And even if we have a shortening, means naturally we are just using it. We are supporting it, we're never using that side. So I think. So I hope you've got some, it was interesting. It was a celebration. I have been literally talking, not giving any of you a chance to talk. I hope it doesn't make you sleep early over your weekend. with the too much talk.
It has been a very, very interesting session. We have learned a lot of things
Okay.
that we never thought about. The experiences is incredible. The experiences that you shared with us is incredible. I hope everyone has got something out of this experience and brave through this difficult times that we are facing.
So how are things in Malaysia now? Are things opening out? Are things better?
We are still locked down. We are on phases of lockdown. Vaccination has started, so the plan is getting more and more people to vaccinate. So hopefully the numbers will come down. The numbers is still rocketing.
Okay.
Yeah, action is a bit slow. How is it in India?
It's much better now. We had a phase last month, April, May was bad. Now things are quite, I mean, we are still under a semi-lockdown in certain parts of India, but vaccination is in full swing. So many of us have got both our doses of vaccines. So, but still, I don't think the institute would open definitely not till the end of the year.
Yeah,
Institutes will be closed.
plan.
Yeah, because especially Mumbai and Pune, the halls are too crowded to accommodate so many people and take a risk.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Here, I think our government is trying to get vaccination. Like,
Okay.
more.
Yeah. So it's good.
Thank you very much for your time,
Thank you. Thank you very much for
sharing.
your patience to listen to me. Thank you. Kind of you to invite me, and I hope we meet soon somewhere in Pune, Mumbai, wherever.
Yes. So
Okay.
PIYM, it will be sending out the subscription form for the book. If you're interested to purchase the book, you can purchase it through PIYM. We will send the form soon. Thank you very much for sharing.
Thank you. Thank you, everybody. Thanks for your
Thank
patience.
you.
Bye-bye.
Thank
Bye.
you. Thank you. Thank you,
Thank you,
Namaste.
Rajvi. Thank you so much.
Namaste. Namaste.
Thank you.
Namaste.
Namaste.
Thank you.
Bye.
Thank
Namaste.
you. Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Join us again.
Hopefully, see you soon. Bye.